So let's go ahead and get this started. As usual, our purpose is to get together as a group because we have some of the similar ideas about being rider coaches, and we're generally here for the more of a common purpose than not. So Tribe Talk is a dialogue with coaches to enhance our communications, help develop an improvement culture, and sharing experiences and ideas to improve the betterment of the tribe. We're up to 43 people. They keep coming in. Last thing is this is a disclaimer. This is an independent, non-organizational thing, regardless of who participates. One simple motive is the improvement of the tribe. And so with that, I'm really glad that you're here tonight and that we all do have like minds. A little bit better tonight, I hope. Just a little bit of the Tribe Talk etiquette for everybody to see. If you do not have your name and maybe your location on your screen, feel free to do that. It helps other people know who you are, where you are. And then sometimes it gets a little bit busy in here during the discussions. A great way to jump into a conversation if other people are talking is to raise your blue hand. That's typically on the bottom of the participants list or someplace else on your screen. Go ahead and search and play with it as you would like. If you're not speaking, please mute your microphone. It helps everybody communicate a little bit better. If you do have problems, re-enter the Tribe Talk as soon as possible. We will continue on. Tonight's events, we have Sarah Kretchmar with Getting Bigger with a Smaller Presence. She'll be first up, followed by Crash Course, Why Dropped Bikes Are No Accident by Mike Davis, and hopefully time for questions from Ray from Training Systems at the end. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Sarah.
Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah? Good. Thank you, Lynn. All right, let's get going. All right. First one, are we there? Wait, why did you guys go away?
I do not see your shared screen yet.
No, you don't?
Nope.
All right, I'm ending the slideshow and starting over.
Pardon the interruption, Dennis Meteors. Carol, do you see me, or Don, do you see me online?
Yeah, we see you now,
here.
Dennis.
All right, thank you much. I'll shut up now.
No problem.
You see it now?
No.
Nope.
We just practiced this.
Yes, we did.
Down at the
That's
bottom,
okay.
the green share screen.
Right. Got that. Carol, is that you helping me?
Yes.
All right.
I'm surprised it's not working.
So am I.
Maybe like I did, reboot your computer. That helped for me.
Hey, Dennis, there's your picture from today.
Yeah. Thanks, Carol.
I'll send it to you.
I already took a picture of my bike before I left the house today. Get an updated one, but thanks.
Still nothing done?
Nope, I don't see anything yet.
I'm sharing the screen and I'm putting on the slideshow. Nothing.
There we go.
There you
Something's
go.
happening. There we go.
Can you guys see all of them or just?
All of them. Go to your
Yeah.
display.
Right.
There you go. Let's start from beginning.
All
There we
right.
go.
Yes. Spectacular. Everybody see the screen? Yes?
Yes, Sarah.
Can somebody read that slide?
Getting bigger with a smaller presence.
Very nice. Okay, well, let's just jump in then, shall we? So those of you that know me know I'm always yapping about how rider coaches are the nucleus of what we do, the force behind this big thing that we're all in. Because when you think about it, rider coaches, without us, man, there's no curriculum to facilitate, no classes, no programs, right? Everybody agree with that? Yeah? So it means we're big, right? Really big. I mean, I'm talking huge, right? So that said, let's go on to our next slide. Would somebody read what the definition of a catalyst is?
A substance that speeds up a reaction, but is not consumed by the reaction. Hence, a catalyst can be recovered, unchanged. I need to move something here. At the end of the reaction, it has been used to speed up.
Thank you. So while you guys are all thinking about whether we're catalysts or not, I would like to share with you how getting bigger with a smaller presence actually came about. So getting bigger with a smaller presence actually came about, it evolved from my childhood. I remember thinking when I was little, I just want to feel big. That's all I want. I just want to feel big, really big. And, well, those of you that know me know I'm 5 feet tall, so clearly there's been a gross error. But that said, I just remember when I was little, my dream was to feel big. So after taking the BRC and becoming a motorcyclist, a biker, I finally felt big. That was the thing that realized my dreams, actually. Okay, everybody with me so far? So becoming a rider coach made me feel even bigger. After all, knowledge is power, so I felt like I was finally big, right? I had the power to empower others, especially women, who possibly, like me, had been marginalized or minimized at some point in their lives. But MSF had other plans for me. MSF came along with the BRC and concepts of learner-centered, and lifelong learners came around. Our debriefs turned into reflections, the classroom into activities where students drove the classroom while rider coaches guided them through. I watched this complete paradigm shift, if you will, and I watched it shift into something different, something originally a bit uncomfortable for me. While my brain yelled at me all the time in the classroom, hey, just zip it, step aside, let them learn. But my mouth kept on flapping for some odd reason. So a while back, Sarah Nagala was bold enough to share with us what personally drove her and motivated her to become a rider coach and an RCT. And I thank her for that. That really resonated firmly in my brain. But it got me thinking to what my own motivations were. And speaking of motivation, I honestly feel that we're all here in Tribe Talks because we all want to be better facilitators. So I'm very excited to hear what everybody's got to say tonight and your thoughts about getting bigger with a smaller presence and learning more from your students and learning how to step aside with a smaller presence but with a bigger impact. So let's move on to our next slide. Would somebody read the top line?
Think about the origin of that original motivation you had. In other words, to become a rider coach. Where does your motivation to be a better facilitator come from now? Oh no, not another learning experience. It's always a learning, experience to me.
Pardon me?
Sarah, that's a good slide. As I was saying, that's always a learning experience for me when I coach.
Would you care to elaborate on that, Dennis?
Well, I learn something from students all the time. You know, that's one of the biggest reasons I've been teaching as long as I have. Excuse me. This will be my 18th year as a rider coach. So one of the things, I always get a big kick out of teaching students the fundamentals of riding a motorcycle.
Thank you for sharing that. Feel free to jump in, you guys.
One of the things that I really enjoy is at the end of BRC, where some of the students have surprised themselves with how well they've done. And that happens much more. And you recognize there that you're not, it's not so much teaching as facilitating, it's helping them teach themselves and discover what they are capable of. And that's a really powerful feeling when you get that.
It's really nice to hear.
What's something that's speaking to me on this slide is, where does your motivation to be a better facilitator come from now? And I think in the environment we're in right now, we're going to have to find ways to be better facilitators, especially with the classroom and social distancing. I know we've been tossing a few things around at one of our sites on how we're going to achieve that.
That's a really good point you bring up, Carol.
One thing that I have said often to students is that I feel like we have a limited amount of time together, and I want to be able to pack as much useful information and facilitation in that time as I possibly can. And so I feel like the more efficient I can be at helping them make connections with the material and with what we're doing, and the better facilitator I can be, the more they get in the time that we have together.
Spectacular. Al Holland?
Something I wanted to add is students really learn by doing, or everybody learns by doing. And the more that we can be a part of it, or, you know, a part of the outcome, the better. So for me, being a better facilitator is finding ways of really being the guide on the side and get the students to interact and share as much information as they can.
That's great, Josh.
So hi, this is Belinda from Alabama, and I wanted to say that I actually love that I came in on the new curriculum as a new coach, because I didn't have to relearn. You know, I know a lot of you guys had to really kind of work really hard at that and becoming facilitators, and I'm gonna have to brag on Mr. Whitehead today. Jim teaching us to sit our behinds down in the back of the room, and this is their class. So that was two things that I know keep in my head as a good facilitator is if they're writing, they're learning. I learned that from Dave. And then, like you said, from Jim, it's sit down and let them teach the class. And those are two of the best things that I know that have motivated me to be a better facilitator, is knowing for a fact that they're not my classes, they're my students' classes.
That's really nice, Belinda.
That's a really good point. I always like to tell my students, this is your class. I'm here to help you in whatever way you need me to help you.
Love it, Carol.
If you think about it, you know, the content that we have is the same. We're delivering the same stuff for every class. What varies it up is how the students come at it and what they give us back. So part of the fun, I think, for me, is to try and roll with where they're at and guide them to, you know, express the answers I want them to come out with in the end, or the thoughts I want them to have. And that requires a lot of flexibility, but to me, that's what makes teaching fun.
No two classes are the same, are they, Lynn?
Thanks, Lynn. Flexibility. I'm learning, people. Keep on coming.
I was going to say, it's actually magical because you never know where a class is going to take you. The energy is different every class. And that's, I think, one of the things that inspires me is you just never know, where the class is going to take you. And you're learning. Every class we're learning as well as the facilitator.
What's really great is sometimes a student will come up with a turn of phrase or a way of thinking about something that we can say, that was really cool. I'm going to save that and use it next time.
200% agree, Lynn.
These tribe talks are a pretty good place for that too, I have to say.
Thank you, Colin. That's good.
Yeah, we get to plagiarize each other and we get to plagiarize from the students.
Best ideas. Yep, I agree, Keith.
I'm not sure exactly who it was talking earlier about, she came in with a new curriculum. I became an instructor in 1995, so I did the old RSS and have continued on since then. But you can still draw bits and pieces from all of the other curriculum that you either took the class with or that you learned on your own or whatever. Just how you can present it or how you can help them learn. That's all we're doing is we're just helping them learn.
Thanks, Keith. You guys ready to move on? Let's give it a shot. Would somebody read our screen, please?
What strategies do you have in place to know more, talk less, and have a greater impact?
Thanks, Matt. It's Matt Berry, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I taught with your dad.
And you taught me how to be a rider coach.
Thanks for reading.
This is Dennis in St. Louis. One of the things I've learned with that statement that Sarah, you put up there, no more, talk less, and have a greater impact. One of the things I've learned, especially out on the range, when you need to do some coaching, always give them one or two good points if possible and send them on their way. Because if you start over coaching, you overload them, basically. Am I right?
Anybody here ever hear a rider coach give a whole laundry list to somebody?
I've ran into that a few times myself, where a coach will end up talking to him for a good 3, 4, 5 minutes when you're running an exercise, and that just delays, everybody getting the time they need in the saddle for that particular exercise.
I think a lot of times when the coaches do the laundry list, they're not so much saying it for the student as they're saying it for themselves. They're kind of going through it in their own head and it's coming out of their mouth.
Well, Lynn, I think you're right there, because I could be at fault of that at times, and I try not to.
It's a great point, Lynn.
Most students are only going to listen to the first thing that's said. And after that, it just becomes a haze. So I don't always manage it, but it's good to just stick to one point, the major point that you want them to correct, and then maybe pick up on something else the next time around. But give them the pieces one at a time.
This is Chris Horton out in Colorado Springs. Only been a rider coach for about 6 months now, but the one thing I've really tried to stick to is give the riders about one good thing that they did, and then pick up on any of this one small thing to work on for their next time down on that particular skill set that we're training.
Sounds good, Chris. So one attaboy and one tip?
Yep, it seems to work pretty well for me. My riders seem to be getting a lot out of it, and I've had a lot less skill failures at the end of the day when it comes since I started doing that.
Nice. Was that your cat?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Was that your cat?
No, I don't have a cat around here.
Who just had a
Sorry.
cat?
Yeah, sorry. That's my fat cat that she just.
Yeah, it wasn't me. I can't have a cat.
You need a wide-angle lens with that cat.
Yeah, she's broad.
I completely agree with Chris on the one attaboy, one tip, send them on their way. Anything more than that, and it just all gets lost.
One of the things I learned in college years ago is most people, when you try to tell them something, only retain 55 to 60% of what you tell them. So naturally, if you overload them with information, they're not going to remember a majority of it. Thus, telling them one or two good points, an attaboy, then send them on their way, and I think like Chris just said.
Question I like to ask them while they're out there on the range, what would you do better next time? Get them to start self-assessing.
And by doing that, it helps you assess if they have a clue what's going on.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what I was going to say, is a few really good learner-centered questions that you're kind of bringing it back to them to use. That thinking part of the brain is very powerful.
Yeah, because many times they will think about what they're doing at that moment, but when they stop, they're kind of like, oh my God, what did I just do? And you kind of bring them back to reality. Hey, what did you just do? Well, I did this, this, and this. Okay, cool. Well, let's adjust it a little bit. Okay, that's easy. And then you get them on their way. And it kind of keeps that stress down low. And it makes it so they understand the process, but they know where they need to tweak it. So it keeps it simple. That tends to work the best, I've found.
Absolutely. One of my favorite things to ask my students, particularly during exercise 4, shifting and stopping, what's one thing you think you could do a little better? And then let them give the answer and then say, okay, do that next time.
It's a good strategy, Matt.
Sarah, I don't know if you were thinking of this particular question in terms of classroom or in terms of range specifically, or both. But I guess I'm curious, it seems like most people are commenting in terms of things that they would do on the range. And I'm curious to know what people's answers to that question would be in thinking about how we work in the classroom.
Who's speaking? It sounds great.
Well, it's Laura Holland.
Hi, Laura Holland. So
Hi.
great. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because when we think about strategies, also in the classroom, definitely. And actually, Lynn brought up last week or the week before, she was talking about strategies on how to bring the 5 core questions. Where am I? Wait, I had notes on this. The 5 core takeaway questions, the 5 core takeaways into the classroom. And that brought me to thinking about the e-course. And I was wondering if all of you guys had taken the e-course just that one time when we had to take it to update to the BRC, or if you guys thought it was a good idea to take it more than that. Don, do you have... Oh, great. Oh, great job, Don. Spectacular. So do we go ahead and do that now?
Yes, you may.
All right. It's exciting.
Just did, Sarah.
That's some teamwork right there.
Well, that's just like out-fancying everybody on this whole business. I don't even know how we can compete with that.
Getting this poll? I know. Isn't
yes.
So
while everybody's taking the poll, I was just looking into taking it again last weekend. I gotta get some password stuff reset. But somebody mentioned taking it again so they can work on tying it in the classroom, and that's an awesome idea.
I know, I started thinking of that because of Lynn's presentation about the 5 core takeaways.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why I did it too.
Exactly.
Yeah. To kind
I
of
think we were all
answer,
what'd you say?
I was just going to say, to kind of answer my own question, for me, that's really where I start from in terms of knowing more. I always try to keep in mind, you know, what the students have seen in the e-course and what they may already know, or just kind of where they're coming from. What's the lens that they're going to filter the classroom experience through, and how can I supply, you know, the key little things here and there that are really going to help them put together the activities with what they already know and, you know, the life experience that they already have.
That's spectacular, Laura.
I think you don't really need to get fancy a lot of times with your e-course references. It could really just be as simple as, do you remember what the e-course said about that?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you remember the part in the e-course that talked about X, Y, and Z, and then, you know, ask a question related to that.
Sometimes just silence and let them figure it out, and they will start talking.
So we are at 86% voted, 45 out of 52. Is there anybody else that needs to vote yet? Or I know we have some people that aren't able to because of their devices. That's okay. I'll give it about 30 more seconds.
Thank you, Don. This is cool.
And polls are closed. Sharing results with everybody. Is everybody able to see that?
Yeah, can you leave that up for a few minutes, Don?
I can.
Spectacular. What do you guys think?
What was the poll? I never saw the poll or results.
Did anybody else hear that? No? Try it again.
I think you broke up, Nicole.
What the poll question was. I couldn't see the poll question result.
Okay. The poll stated, how many times have you taken the MSF Basic e-course? Never, once, twice, more than twice. And number two, do you think it would be beneficial for rider coaches to take it multiple times? Yes or no? 93% ended in the affirmative for taking it multiple times. 7% said no. And then for the first questions, how many times have you taken the MSF basic course? 2% said never, 17% once, 37% twice, and 43% more than twice.
Thanks, Don.
You're welcome. And stopping the share.
Okay, you guys ready for my last cool slide? Yeah? Okay.
Bring it on, Sarah.
All right. There you go.
I think you skipped one there, Sarah.
I did on purpose because I gave it to Don to do the poll instead, but thank you for noticing, Colin. Really appreciate the input, everybody. I learned a ton. Anybody else?
Always do.
Good.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We appreciate your time and your session. And with that, we'll go over to Mike Davis. You ready, Mike?
I think so. Josh, out on the East Coast, can you give me a mic check, please? Can you hear me okay?
Crystal clear. Sounds
Oh,
awesome.
okay, great. I realize there's no logic to just because you're on the East Coast, it doesn't mean anybody else can hear me, but I wanted to annoy the tech experts in the crowd. And I want to thank Sarah for going first, because I'm probably going to have the same technical problems that she had. So I appreciate her breaking trail on that.
My pleasure.
Thank you. I owe you one, Sarah.
I'll collect.
Thank you. So I have my presentation up. Going back to share screen. And we'll see if this works.
It is.
What have you got? Crash course?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I also, in addition to Sarah, I need to thank Don specifically, because I hadn't actually planned on doing this, but just to inform folks that may get the same question I did, he asked me if I were going to give a presentation on Tribe Talks, what might I give it on? And I suggested, well, drop bikes are always an issue, so probably that. He said, great, please be ready on Sunday. And I said, shit. I didn't actually plan on it necessarily, but I thought it was a very keen idea, and he did a great job of getting me involved. And once I started thinking about it, I realized I really wanted to try and do a good job if I could. The other thing I noticed as I went back to previous presentations, I realized that there's a lot of horsepower in attendance, but also a lot of really good presentations out there. And I feel confident that I'm embracing setting the low bar on the presentations. So hopefully that will be consistent with what you all find. Now I need to figure out if I'm advancing my slides correctly. I'm hoping that it comes out to be a little bit better than what you see here, but you were warned if it's not any better than that. The other thing I need to do is apologize for the way my brain works. I have a tendency to not overthink, but overprocess. For example, the last project I did at my house about 2 weeks ago, this was my whiteboard. I mention that because I'm not going to do that for this type of presentation, just like was promised, we're going to be interactive. But this is the kind of thing that for even very simple projects, I tend to be a visual mapper. So we're not going to get too deep into the weeds here, but if I start going on rabbit trails, just feel free to yank my chain and pull me back to reality and remind me that it's all about you, not about me, which is, I think, a good lesson for all of us anyway. So one of the things that has always been true, and as of, I think last week was my 20-year anniversary, I went through an April 2000 IP back in the RSS days. And so in 20 years, I haven't had an original idea. Everything that I've gotten, I've picked up from the horsepower on this presentation, I mean, on this talk right now, and any number of unlimited numbers of people that have offered advice and told me I was doing things wrong, offered a different way to do it, and all of that. So please shamelessly steal anything that I've got. And if there's any value to this particular presentation, you can have it. I don't care. I mean, it's all yours. And I'm completely unselfish when it comes to anything I produce, since I probably used ideas that I took from other people anyway. What I would offer respectfully is that if you have a crash problem, if you're dropping a lot of bikes in your organization or in your classes, you have a culture problem, not a crash problem. When I put up this slide, I think last year in one of the presentations that I did in at IREDS, there was a lot of a controversy even, because I think we want to believe that we are part of organizations like the cohesive team list indicated in blue. But if we're honest, whether we're part of a rider training school, whether we're part of a state program or an administrative agency, or even part of just a family or a tribe, we tend to naturally, by default, end up on the right side. I think teams, and a team being anything more than one person, are inherently dysfunctional. You have to work to be functional. But that requires a lot of things that we're not naturally inclined to be, which is combative, for example, having healthy conflict. conflict that says, for example, if myself and Don, my friend Don Green, teach a class, we have enough foundation in our relationship to know that if I do something wrong, I can trust him to call me out on it and not let me get away with it, rather than, in the interest of peace and harmony, let me get away with it and turn a blind eye because he doesn't want to sacrifice our personal relationship for the sake of embarrassing me or risk my wrath if I disagree with him. So I would offer that if you are struggling and your organization are struggling with any of those issues, there's a bigger fundamental problem. One of the things I promised Don and that he advised was to pause occasionally for a checkpoint and to let people engage with what I just said. So let's start already right now and see what your thoughts are on what I've just said, please. If you're happy, I'm happy. Should I keep going?
I think you made a good point about the conflict and the ability of one rider coach to be able to call out another on something that they see as not necessarily wrong, but an opportunity for improvement. That's a really good thing to have between two rider coaches.
You bet. Thank you. One of the other things that might be worthwhile to note also is we don't typically have the time unless we're part of a team. I mean, there are people in Washington that I spent 10 years teaching with. We taught 100 classes a year. So we have trust that's built on a lot of experience. But if I relocate to another state and I immediately want to get into the training schools and get into the mix, we don't have the time. We have to be functional from the start. And the students deserve our best from the beginning, from the moment we step foot on the range, even if we've never been there before. So one of the challenges as an organization, I think, and as an industry and a culture of coaches and trainers and agency people, is that we have to have the strength of character to immediately be functional. And yeah, if it damages the relationship, maybe we can recover it, maybe we can't. But ultimately serving the needs of the students and having the positive student outcomes is more important than you protecting my ego because you don't want to hurt my feelings or you don't want to embarrass me or something like that. And so I appreciate your comment. Because a lot of times we don't necessarily have the time. We have to bring that integrity with us and be prepared to challenge each other, good and bad.
It's a two-way street as well. We have to be willing to challenge and constructively comment on other coaches, but we need to be prepared to receive those other comments as well. I still consider myself a fairly new coach, just coming into my third year. I've been very grateful for the comments and advice that I've received in the first 2 years from more experienced coaches. But I've always received it very willingly. I hope I can continue to, even from newer coaches, be ready to accept that constructive criticism.
That's fantastic. I agree with you 100%. I heard something about a year ago. I didn't make it up myself, but that I kind of adopted. If I'm not coachable myself, why am I a coach? If I'm not trainable, why am I calling myself a trainer? It can't be one-sided. I can't simply expect other people to heed my wisdom and intake my information if I'm not receptive to somebody, whether I've known them 10 years or 10 minutes, to say, consider another way to do it, what you're doing. So I agree with you, absolutely.
Mike, along that line, one of the things I've learned over the years is, like you just said, if I'm not approachable or coachable by another coach, why am I still being a coach? One of the things I've learned over the years with most of the coaches I've taught in the St. Louis area, as well as over in Illinois, we talk to each other, say, we can pretty much figure out what each one's thinking, especially out on the range. And that works better, especially time, as well as getting the point across to the students.
100% agreed. Thank you, Dennis. And good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, sir. I hope to make it to Colorado this year.
Absolutely. Even come to Washington if you like. I'm all over the place.
Also, if you're teaching or coaching with somebody you haven't coached with before, every break you should briefly talk about the next two exercises so you know what you expect of each other.
I agree with Carol on that one 100% because her and I have taught together periodically. And that's the same thing with most coaches in the area, that we teach with, because a lot of them I've taught with over the years, we pretty much know what each one is thinking for each particular exercise or even in the classroom.
Sarah here from Wisconsin. My strategy for learning from every class is also teaching with as many rider coaches as I've never taught with before. So I always seek out the new rider coaches at whatever site I'm at. And with that, I think I confer with the other rider coach every single class, every single exercise. We always talk before, no matter who I'm teaching with, no matter how many times I've taught with them. I think it's important to touch base with the other rider coach always. Don't you guys?
Yeah. Sarah, where do you teach at, if I may ask?
Wisconsin.
Okay.
Where in particular?
Well, I was originally going to try to go up there for an art class, and I can't remember where, but I ended up trying to go down to Arkansas, which was canceled out anyway. But it was up near Madison, I think it was. I can't remember who was the coach up there.
Well, I teach for a riding academy site, a tech college, and a private site. So I have my hands in all of the 3 different types of sites that we actually have here in Wisconsin.
Might have been a private site that I was going to go to, but I don't remember the coach's name up there. I couldn't tell you.
We've got 198, so.
Okay. I'm not terrible at names anyway. Let's move on.
So, question for the group. Talon, by the way, out of Tennessee. Has anybody dealt with a coach or coached with somebody who provides them feedback in a rather negative manner in front of everybody? Say, hey, you forgot this, or they want it done a certain way and you're not doing it that way. And if they did, how'd they handle it?
Well, I've apologized and say, hey, I'll make that correction. But next time, let's talk before we get to that point. Try not to let any conflict be shown to the students, because if you do let conflict be shown to the students, then you lose their trust, or you could lose
Really
their
good
trust.
point, Carol. That's very nice. Nicely said.
Thank you.
To kind of speak to Al's point with regard to trust, somebody said earlier that it's a two-way street, and what that means to me is that I trust that my co-coach is going to do the best job that they can do and, adhere to the curriculum the way that they know how to do it and, put forth the effort to the greatest degree that they can. And so I go in with that assumption, I guess.
If I could, this is a point where style makes all the difference in the world, and how you approach working with another coach. I did 20 years of high school and college basketball. I used to work with people I never met with on a continuous basis. It's all about communication, and it's all about just working at getting along. There's always going to run into somebody who's a domineering or a headstrong guy. You have to make a decision, do I get into a confrontation? I don't think that helps anybody. You just kind of roll with it and move on and write it down.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like we're all on the same page with the same type of coaches, but I had a situation where one of the coaches that I was teaching with had rode his motorcycle through all 48 connected states, and he told about all those stories throughout the range and in the classroom. And by the time he got done with some of the stories, we would be 2 or 3 sets behind where we should be. So even after talking to him in private, he would always go to the same stories every week or every class. So I ended up not wanting to coach with him because it seemed like Sunday afternoon, when we should be giving the final exams, we're still talking about a road trip in California. So I don't teach with him anymore. So that was the resolution that I had with him.
I think a lot of it depends on the rider coach that you're working with. We all make mistakes from time to time. I've botched demos and completely missed a particular path of travel. And I've had the other rider coach go, hey, Matt, do you want to show them how to do fill in the blank that I missed? And you can look at them and go, yeah, let's show them how to do that this time, and go redo the demo. It happens. You know, sometimes you have to get called out on that, because if you miss something, you got to fix it.
Yeah, if you go right by the cards, it's hard to get off track.
Hello. Hello? This is Rick.
We hear you, Rich.
Yeah, we got you.
Sometimes you got to use a mistake as a learning experience. That's it. That's exactly what I would do with a coach. If a coach maybe wrote a demo wrong, I'd say to the students, what did you see there? What did we expect? And make it a learning experience, and don't get it becomes a positive instead of a negative.
Very good.
I was going to say to tie on to what Rich just said, you know, we always should hopefully self-assess and reflect. And anytime something doesn't go particularly right, or even when it goes real, of okay, what went well and why, and what didn't go so well, and what would I want to do different, you know, the next time.
Sometimes if you know you've written a demo incorrectly, you can say, hey, wait a minute, call yourself out to the other coach, and then use it, like you said, as a learning opportunity, and let me do that correctly for you.
Do over.
Yep. See, we're not all perfect.
Yeah, we like to say, oh, hey, they were just practicing. They're gonna do it right this time. They were just practicing that demo real quick. Kind of helps to cover them and keep them safe, you know, let them save face. So it's good.
So this is Amy from Indiana. To what the first gentleman was speaking of, if you've got a coach that just is all about me, as opposed to trying to engage the student about them, you know, that's definitely something afterwards I would suggest talking to your other coach about, you know, kind of delicately, this is kind of a deal, man. I mean, this is what I think went wrong, and I feel like it would have been better suited if we focus more on them instead of telling your stories about how you rode through California. And if it continues and continues, then talk to the admin about it, you know, whoever's in charge, and be like, hey, this guy kind of needs to be reined in. He's, you know, I've tried to approach him. I've tried to suggest this and that, and he's not picking up when I'm laying down. But something needs to be done because, you know, Sunday afternoon, you find out you're way behind schedule, and seriously reflecting back on why. Why are we so far behind? Why are we so far behind? And every time you just come up with the same answer, well, it's because of this guy. This guy just keeps sharing so many of his own stories that it's taking up too much time. I mean, it just needs to be dealt with from an admin point of view.
Like someone said earlier, it sounds like that particular kind of coach is not coachable themselves.
This is
I agree. And you guys, the fact that we didn't rehearse it is impressive, considering you've just brought up a couple of things that always come up when I do these types of presentations, which is, okay, we acknowledge or take ownership that we may have some roadblocks in our culture. How do we fix it? How do we change? Anybody can identify the problem, but how do we arrive at the solution? A lot of the research and other things I've been doing academically on motivation and positive outcomes and other things, everyone wants to be functional, but we don't always have a good map to get there. And this is not going to be very complicated. In fact, you may go, well, duh, it's exceedingly simple. But historically, people seem to need to know two things, and they have to answer it for themselves. In our case, we know that what we do matters. How much it matters individually to us specifically because I use it to buy a new motorcycle with my income, or I just like the thrill of seeing a student succeed, which is probably the juice for a lot of us. But in general, figuring out for that employee, that coach, that subordinate or peer, do they understand why it matters? Do they understand why it matters, frankly, to shut up and let the students engage with their own learning, let their brain process at the speed that they need to, rather than try and consume all of this input that means something to me because I enjoyed my trip to California, but why the hell would you care? And why would a novice student who's still struggling with friction zone care about my trip across the Golden Gate Bridge or whatever? So I agree with you, absolutely. The other question that we tend to come up with is, and this is where, yeah, we get a paycheck. Some of us, plenty of us do it for free, or at least have said there are some classes that we would have gladly not been paid for because they were so good and so enjoyable and it was such a positive experience. And then maybe that one class out of 100 where we think they're not paying us enough for this. But we've had the full spectrum. But organizationally, I think leaders in organizations have a tendency to focus on making sure that people feel rewarded without holding them accountable for the standards that earn the rewards. And if you can find that balance, then it's much easier for even a peer to hold a peer accountable. You don't have to necessarily take it to the chain of command. If issues like that continue to come up and you continually have to send them up the chain, that's a culture problem too. Because if we're all working as part of an organization that holds each other accountable because that's the culture, there's nowhere to hide. If I'm screwing up, it doesn't matter if somebody working the reception desk calls me out. I have to pay attention. I don't have to wait for the CEO or the president or the owner to put me in the office in the hot seat, because the hot seat is, we do it right around here. Maybe you'd be happier working somewhere else. It's a tough conversation to have, but keeping a weak team member around who refuses to grow and be coachable is never a good enough reason to not lose that resource. I notice we're getting a little bit long, so I'm going to go ahead and accelerate just a little bit, unless anybody has any burning contributions to that.
Mike, my
Please.
map and my standard is the curriculum. You know what I mean?
Yep, and that's where we're headed right now. Thank you very much. Perfect. One final question that I'll wrap up this little bitty segment with is making sure that your people, whether it's your team, the people you work for or with, understand the why behind anything that we're doing. And that leads right into the curriculum discussion. All that I did was create a little bit of a matrix for exercises 1 and 2, because it seems like that really drives success or failure for at least some students when it comes to how we deliver those early exercises. So going right into the pre-exercise activities, I've done probably 1,000 quality assurance visits of one kind or another, including just a drive-by site visit where I just popped in and just kind of assessed. And I've done that for several different states that I've worked in. And it was always a good experience, even if the outcome wasn't what we hoped that it might be. So a few things that I've isolated that are kind of the either best practices or most common things that have been noted in pre-exercise 1 from a quality assurance standpoint. Number 1, read the cards. I think at least half a dozen people today in the last hour have said just follow it, or even the comment threads in the chat section of the meeting. So just reading the cards, the number of times that we see people afflicted with the okay now disease, they read the cards, okay, now here's all this extra information that is not on the cards, but I think it's important, and I have always thought I'm smarter than Dr. Ray Oakes anyway, so why wouldn't I just blah, 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 until we don't ride. So it's really frustrating to have people that do that, whether it's war stories or simply the add-ons that they think are critical that really aren't, because they become noise very quickly. The second item I actually shamelessly stole from my friend John up in New England. He has a hat, a range hat that he wears, and the initials SMSU are printed on it. And you'll forgive me, but what it stands for is stop making shit up. So anytime anybody starts to rabbit trail or get away from the cards or anything else, he just points to his hat, and that sends the message, hey, this is the culture. We're not making stuff up around here. Get back on plan and let's get moving. The other thing is we've seen a lot of variation in the initial location of pre-exercise 1. Some coaches requiring that students have their gear on. That just means they didn't read the cards, or they've decided they know the cards well enough they don't have to read them anymore. Initial location and initial coaching tend to be locally driven protocols, so I won't get too much into that. But by far, the biggest issue I've ever seen with pre-exercise 1 in hundreds of quality assurance visits is them being hurried. The general perception among some coaches that we need to get through this so we can get to the fun stuff, so we can get them riding. Laying this solid foundation in pre-exercise 1 is the goal of it is fundamental to getting them riding. So I would just offer that if you're going to take a little bit more time anywhere, take it early, because you'll get huge dividends on that investment later on. Even just one dropped bike can cost you 20 minutes, or a break that goes 15 or 20 minutes longer than it had to because you had to do paperwork and all of that, or just the psychological impact of even an easy drop on a student that's already struggling a little bit. Any comments on that before I move on to the next one?
Yes, can we all do SMSU on all of our shirts? That would be spectacular.
Sure.
We could do like a team.
Right.
Maybe
Yes,
we can get all
MSU
shirts
tribe.
together like that from all over the country.
That'd
What's
be
that?
great, Dennis, yeah.
Mike, you take care of that for us?
Yeah, I'll get right on that. Just send it to send the bill to General Delivery, Seattle.
Okay.
You won't have
I
any
was
issues.
gonna say, send it to Ray in the LA area.
Yeah, Ray and Irvine. Yeah.
Exercise 1, it helps take the fear factor out of a lot of the students. And when there's any fear involved, the gross motor skills and finer motor skills pretty much disappear, the ability of the student to do them. So exercise 1, you need to spend enough time that everybody's comfortable.
I agree. Absolutely. And thank you, Bill. Again, it almost was like we rehearsed this. We actually didn't, but that worked perfectly. And I think this is my last slide. Exercise 1, the initial location, the variation of that is all over the place. Again, local policy, local protocol would govern that. Something that comes up very much is very similar to anybody that's ever seen a coach a curve exercise or a cornering exercise, and they seem to get so fixated on a student looking through the turn constantly, whether or not they got the initial sight picture and they have the good picture and image and map of where the curve goes. Maybe they don't absolutely need to commit fully to keep looking through the turn the entire time. But some coaches feel like if they don't have that full, constant, consistent head turn, the student's performance is somehow going to be compromised, even if they look, they can see that the student is getting through there fine. So I don't want to get too much into the weeds about that, but the same thing happens in exercise 1 with regards to having their eyes up. I submit, especially the way I'm a visual mapper. You saw my whiteboard. I need to actually use my eyes to look down to see where these pieces are so my brain can put the map together, and then I can look away after I've got it kind of figured out, and then I can challenge myself to remember where it was. But I can't do it initially. I have to look down. So while how I need to do it is not the way all the students need to do it, and my job is to recognize that I need to adjust to what they need. At the same time, I would be mindful of, if anybody's ever teaching with me and you see me getting too fixated on eyes up when the student clearly is still struggling with the initial map phase, I might just maybe take a pause and consider whether or not that student needs that particular coaching at that moment. The other issue by far that can all but eliminate, I think, the dropped bike problem is the small notes that sometimes, in fact, oftentimes get missed, is the action steps 8 and action steps 15 in the range cards for exercise 1. That, in my estimation, and I'm happy to be challenged, I'm coachable on any of it if somebody disagrees, but I think that is where the student is proving to us, not that they hear us, but that they actually understand smooth front brake application and using less pressure than they think they need to get the bike stopped and avoid that abruptness and that aggressiveness that leads to paperwork. What do you guys think about that?
Give me a minute to look up action steps 8 and 15.
Action step 8 is when they're rolling the bike backwards and forwards initially in exercise 1, and 15 is the transition to get them in position for number 2.
I guess I'm curious to know if you differentiate between a dropped bike and a tip over. And if you feel like there are different causes between those two, if you do in fact consider them different things.
I guess I would be reluctant to decide. I mean, when I do it, I guess I don't make a distinction only because I feel like the end result, even just psychologically, even if there's no real damage, it interrupts the flow for the student. It may agitate their anxiety a little bit too. So the need to resolve the problem and the problems that even a tip over can create can really be similar. Although we've seen plenty of times when a student just even couldn't quite muscle the bike to keep it from dropping down on the peg, and there's no harm, no foul, and even they don't care. But what have you seen that causes you to ask about the distinction, if you don't mind?
Speaking as a 30-plus year motorcyclist that happens to also be inseam challenged, I can tell you that I think that for those of us in that category, sometimes it's just a mass and or height challenge issue that causes people to be more predisposed to just having tip overs. But I completely agree with you about the emotional impact of that on the student, depending on, you know, their point of view and what the cause of it was.
Sure, you bet. And yeah, we can probably get world enough in time. We could definitely get into the everything from the equipment resources. Sometimes you only have so much equipment, so whatever somebody's inseam is, it may compromise their ability. But I agree with you. I would offer, at least in my experience, that taking the time in pre-exercise 1 and exercise 1 to try and forecast those problems ahead of time, even if you don't necessarily have the ability to change equipment or anything like that. But I mean, I definitely, I like your experience in that is very different than mine. I just tend to be a taller person, and so but
right.
we've all had the experience of having that happen. This student who otherwise has excellent balance, and they just tip it
Right.
over, but there's no big deal.
And I don't think that there's necessarily a right or a wrong answer to my question. It's just something that I have observed that, you know, I sometimes think that it, for a larger person, whether you're a super tall guy with big giant hands who doesn't think that the Grom can be tricky to ride because the clutch friction zone is so tiny or whatever, you know, sometimes if I reframe that in terms of what it's like to be confronted with those issues as a small, short person, you kind of get a light bulb and like, oh, well, maybe that, you know, is not because the student is struggling with the clutch, more so that they are struggling with the size of their hand versus the distance from the grip to the lever, or whatever, you know, whatever the circumstance is.
No, thank you very much. That's absolutely, I agree 100%.
Wait,
So that's all I had, Don. I'm sorry, I cut somebody off. Carol?
Yes, Carol from Missouri. One of the things that I like to do in exercise 1 is, you know, when they turn the handlebars, do that a few times on your own. When you're ready to move on, bring your square up your handlebars. That way you give them that time to manipulate the controls. And I do that with, I try and do that with each one of the steps. That way we're at their pace, not our pace.
Absolutely, and I definitely submit that any extra time invested in 1 and 2, or even the first 4, they're just, I mean, yeah, you can drag it out too far and get into an exhaustion point, but the getting them to minimal mastery and some of that stuff, it pays off the entire rest of the class.
Absolutely. Hey, Mike,
Agreed
action
completely.
step 8 is totally and crucially vital. What I do is I watch the students as they're moving the bike forward. I watch them apply the brake. I look for abrupt front end action. And if I see it, I go over and I make that a learning point right away, because I found if during action part number 8, if I do that, I have less tendencies of falling in exercise 2.
Absolutely. I also saw and shamelessly stole for myself, for my toolkit, about a year ago, somebody using action step 14 to great benefit, where the static demo of stopping using the brakes, they actually asked the students that they had previously identified in action step 8 that were struggling a little bit with brake use to play the role of the coach and to provide the coaching to the coach that was actually doing the static demo. They would intentionally make a minor error in or emulate what the student had done and say, okay, how would you fix me? How would you coach me to success on that? And the student then echoed exactly the coaching that they had received to fix the problem for themselves. It was brilliant. And so I kind of keep that arrow in my quiver myself to try and pull it out as needed. But it was really effective, I thought.
Like you said about the eyes up during the earlier steps of exercise 1, I really like to tell my students, go ahead and look at it. Now, can you do this with your eyes up as much as possible? But forcing them into eyes up early on doesn't seem to be terribly helpful.
Yeah, it can definitely elevate their stress to the point that, because they recognize, maybe even before we do, that they are the type of learner that needs to see it, and they need to kind of look at it and let their brains form those pathways. So yeah, very nice. I agree, Matt.
Is that your last slide, Mike, or do you have more?
It is. The rest of it's just window dressing.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate that. And let me see if I can quick jump to Ray. And Ray, you have anything to add tonight?
No, there's no time left for me. That's good for all of you.
You like that, don't you?
I do.
That's okay. You sure? Does anybody have any questions for Ray?
Well, I guess my question would be, Ray, was I off base on anything? I'm coachable, so.
Of course, you were not off base. I think he hit some highlights, and we've emphasized quite a bit of that during VRETs, is take care of them early on. And, you know, if you have a rider coach that thinks the bike goes where you look, they're trying to get the eyes up all the time. They're way off on that. So thanks for hitting some highlights.
Yeah, you bet.
I think we need that SMS you had for QA SCC courses from now on.
All right, then. So to wrap up tonight's Tribe Talk, a few last things here. Let's give a great round of applause for Miss Sarah and Michael for their 2 wonderful sessions. Greatly appreciate that they jump in and have provided some guidance and some facilitation for us. And, you know, I always put out there, you could be next. All you have to do is step forward. And then once again, thanks, Dr. Oakes, for stepping in and just hanging out with us. It's always a pleasure. And I have a few parting thoughts. See where they are here. And they're gone. Okay, so I'm gonna have to do this off the cup, and I apologize. But something I was thinking about this week was farmers, because yesterday I got a call from my brother as he was out in the field with this big tractor and throwing anhydrous ammonia into the field. And I started thinking about us as facilitators and how important it is that we plant the seeds early. You know, for a farmer, if you don't plant the seeds on time, and if you don't nurture the seed with good soil and fertilizer, by the time it's time to harvest, you don't get a very good crop. And so some of the discussion tonight with Miss Sarah and her, you know, why do we do this? Well, I think we do this a lot because we enjoy those aha moments. But the aha moments are only seeds that we can take forward and nurture and grow to get the final product for harvest. You know, we're here because this is an improvement environment. We're sharing with each other great ideas, writing down notes, stealing, as Mike says, from some of the smartest people in the country. So those things help to fertilize what we're doing to get a better outcome and better students. If we have better students, then we can get more towards the rewards we're trying to reap and why we do this in the first place. It's not for the aha moments. It's actually to help students be better riders. And it's also to eventually, in the course of helping all these smaller numbers of students, is to change the numbers of injuries and mortality rates across the country. So it's a little bit bigger thought on some of the things we're doing, but why you're here is very important. It's more than the aha. It's getting bigger with a smaller presence. It's having no accidents on the motorcycles, and it's promoting something we truly believe in. So just some parting thoughts before we leave. Next week, Carol Metter has jumped in and said that she's going to give us a session on exercise 9. And the other person is yet to be determined. I've got some leads, but I wanted to keep it a surprise for now. So something to look forward for next Sunday night. How you can help, it's up on the screen. You can see that, of course. Really, you know, everybody here has the potential to run a session and share your ideas with people. And so I really look forward to the next person that steps forward to do that. And we'll keep this going as long as somebody shows up. We'll keep on training. Be a mentor, be mentored. And last but not least, before we leave, I have one more poll. Let's see if I can pull it up. Nope, that's not it. Okay, my other poll is right here. Just a couple quick questions before you leave tonight. And these are kind of a random contextual experience to see where everybody is thinking. We have a total of 56 people in here. I'll give you a couple minutes to vote. Usually happens pretty quickly. And then I'll give the results. For the people who are on Facebook and can't see it, question number 1 is, what legendary coach stated that coaching is really teaching? Your options are Larry Bird, Phil Jackson, John Wooden, Bobby Knight, and Vince Lombardi. Question number 2, motor learning is most associated with what field of study? First answer is physical education. Second is cognitive psychiatry. Third is cognitive psychology. Brain-based learning is number 4, and cognitive philosophy is number 5. 50% votes are in. And just so everybody knows, these are not stump the chump questions. We just want to kind of get a feel for what you're thinking out there.
I don't know any of those names in the top one.
That's okay, Jillian. Just play. Multiple guests tonight.
Yeah, I just took a complete guess. I don't know. Well, I know the name Larry Bird, but that's the only one that I know.
Well, Colin, don't feel bad. I'm from Wisconsin, and I only know Vince Lombardi because that's where he's from, and he's football, and I do football, so.
Right.
I was going to say my only sports is MotoGP, so.
And I relied on an answer from my husband.
We're at 83% voted, 45 out of 54. I'll give it a little while longer. Not seeing any changes. I know many of you can't vote, and that's all right.
Well, God love you for putting Larry Bird in there. Larry Bird's our guy.
Where are you from?
Terre Haute, Indiana.
There you go, girl.
Hey, Bobby Knight's in there too, and he's Indiana.
Yeah.
Indiana showing up tonight, huh? All right. I don't see anybody else voting. I'm going to go ahead and end the polling, and I'll share the results with everybody. If you give me a second, I'm going to do a screenshot of this for our archives, and then I'll give you the answers. Legendary coach, Vince Lombardi won with 50%.
Yes.
I will tell you this, it was John Wooden. However, in some research, I did find out that Vince Lombardi said the same thing. It's hard to say who stole it from who. How's that? Bobby Knight came in third, Phil Jackson, and then Larry Bird. Number 2, the winner says physical education at 37%. Number 2 was brain-based learning. Number 3, cognitive psychology. And number 4, cognitive psychiatry. The answer is cognitive psychology. So some things to go look for in the future if you like to find out where the answers came from. I'm sure there will be discussions offline. All you have to do is ask the right people. I'm still searching for them, so don't ask me. All right.
Can you give some, who was the coach who said it? Like, what was that person's
John
deal?
Wood, he's from UCLA, and if you've ever read the book, they haven't learned, you haven't taught until they have learned, by Sven Nader. Really good book. I recommend it. It was the start of my journey on being a better coach.
What kind of sport did he coach?
He coached UCLA basketball.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And
All right.
Vince Lombardi's from New Jersey.
Leave it to Bill.
Vince Lombardi said it first before John Wooden was even born.
Well, we'll have to
That is true, but he got his coaching start on from Green Bay, if I remember right.
That's correct.
He coached for St. Cecilia's High School in New Jersey.
What, like 2 million years ago?
A few decades ago, actually.
All right, folks. We are about 20 minutes over tonight. I apologize, but as always, it's a great time to be with y'all and really learned a lot. Got lots of notes written down to inspire me for the next week. I hope you've been inspired too. And we'll see you next Sunday, May 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you'd like, we're available on Wednesday nights for a little chit chat at the same time. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you coming to Tribe Talk.
Where do we find the link for the Wednesday nights?
I will post it on the MSF Rider Coach Facebook page. It is always also on the email that you should be getting Wednesday. If you're not on the list, just give me a shout and I'll fix that.
Also, congratulations, Dr. Green, on your recent accomplishment.
Yes, congratulations.
Appreciate it.
All right, Dr. Green. Thank you. Again, good time tonight.
Thank you all for coming. It's my pleasure and I enjoy doing it.
Everybody be safe, stay healthy.
Thanks. Okay.